Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 3 of Self-Care Techniques for Parents. Please note that there are 2 more sessions that will be happening next Friday and the Friday after that from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please be sure to join us for those. Registration is now closed for this group, but there are other groups that are still open or will be in the near future. If you go to ATTCH you will find a list of other groups you can sign up for. Okay. So I'm going to quickly do a recap of our previous 2 sessions for those who were not able to make it to those sessions and who are watching us online right now. So what is self-care? Self-care is caring for ourselves from the inside out, and it emphasizes the active role of people in maintaining their own well-being. When we pay attention to our thoughts, our feelings, it translates into how we interact with others and also positively influences our health. So these days, as a result of the pandemic, people are facing new realities of working from home, temporary unemployment, homeschooling of children, lack of physical contact with extended family, friends, and colleagues. Because of this, people are very likely to develop symptoms of psychological stress and disorder, including low mood, insomnia, stress, anxiety, anger, irritability, emotional exhaustion, depression, and post-traumatic stress symptoms. In particular, low mood and irritability tend to be very common, but getting involved in self-care activities as part of daily practice can help us manage stress and prevent difficulties and symptoms of health problems. Later on in today's session, we are going to try out some activities that we could do to optimize psychological well-being. So good self-care also includes caring for our bodies through proper nutrition, adequate exercise, and sleep. Evidence from research shows that this has a direct and positive impact on our mood, our thoughts, and feelings. So how does self-care influence parenting? Good self-care enhances our coping skills with appropriate techniques, which makes us resilient and capable of successfully managing difficult emotions that come with new or challenging situations. Learning effective techniques and coping skills to calm the limbic system, which is the seat of the emotional brain, is instrumental to experiencing less anxiety and stress from the world around us. So we have wired into our bodies skills to keep us at an even keel. 80% of the fibers of the vagus nerve connects the brain with many internal organs. So 80% are afferent. So that means they move away from the body to the brain. So what this means is that we can control our level of arousal by how we breathe, by how we sing, chant, or move. So I'm going to pause here and talk a bit about the emotional brain and the thinking or rational brain and how they operate in emotionally charged situations. So when we experience big emotions like anger, fear, or anxiety, the amygdala, which is the alarm center of the brain, it's involved and it engages our fight, flight, or freeze response. Now, the amygdala is located in the limbic system, and that's the seat of the emotional brain. So when big emotions dominate, we flip our lid. So we literally flip our lid. My fingers represent the prefrontal cortex. So when we do that, the thinking brain is not actively engaged. So a relatable example is when you're anxious about something and you go to the grocery store to pick up some items and you find that you have a difficult time recalling a short list of items you want to get from the store. In this example specifically, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, that's DLPFC for short, that's involved in working memory, and that is the area of the brain that is negatively affected. So in our very first session, I also went over the idea of caring for ourselves on the inside through exercising self-compassion. So self-compassion, in essence, means motivating yourself with kindness instead of criticism. This is because while the inner critic can motivate, it can also be quite punishing and destructive. This concept is actually based on the work of Richard Schwartz. He developed the internal family systems model of therapy. And so under his model, exercising self-compassion means becoming familiar with the parts of ourselves that we like and those that we don't like. So the vulnerable, entitled, frightened, scared parts of ourselves, and so on. When we know, understand, and forgive our inner selves, it could make us kinder and more compassionate. Part of understanding ourselves is recognizing the positive intentions of the most critical and troublesome of our inner selves. So, as parents, you may often be overwhelmed by the different roles you have to play and find that you have rolling thoughts and emotions that are critical. This is normal. In the experiential portion of today's session, we're going to run through some exercises that will help you remain separate from your rolling thoughts and be more peaceful and accepting of yourself. So as I mentioned a little earlier, right now with the ongoing pandemic, feelings of anxiety are being experienced daily by so many. When we are anxious, it negatively affects the DLPFC, as I mentioned before, which is a part of our brain that is responsible for thinking and planning. So when the DLPFC is affected, our working memory is impaired, as I mentioned earlier, and our ability to, take a mental note of grocery items to pick up, perhaps recalling a phone number, we may find that difficult. What mindfulness does is that it increases the activation of the prefrontal cortex and decreases the activation of the amygdala, which triggers our emotional responses. So what ends up happening is that once the prefrontal cortex is engaged, control over the emotional brain, that increases. So in sum, it's important to understand how our thoughts, our feelings, unresolved or leftover issues may be impacting us, and to take steps to calm down the emotional brain so that we can engage effectively with the world in all the roles that we play as parents. For today's session, I'm going to shift focus to the idea of unresolved and leftover issues and how they can affect the parent-child relationship. So the idea of unresolved and leftover issues is from the work of Daniel Siegel and Mary Hartzell. I have referred to them in my last two sessions, and their work is reflected in the ITAT model at ATTCH Niagara. So when we become a parent, we bring with us issues from our own past that may influence the way we parent our children. Experiences that are not fully processed may create unresolved and leftover issues that influence how we react to our children. These issues can easily get triggered in the parent-child relationship. And when this happens, our responses toward our children often take the form of strong emotional reactions, impulsive behaviors, distortions in our perceptions or sensations in our bodies. These intense states of mind, they impair our ability to think clearly and to remain flexible. And they also, of course, affect our interactions with our kids. At these times, we're not acting like the parents we want to be, and are often left wondering why this role of parenting sometimes seems to bring out the worst in us. Issues that are rooted in our past impact our present reality, and they also directly affect the way we experience and interact with our children, even when we're not aware of their origins. So to give an example of how unresolved issues or leftover issues can play into day-to-day life, specifically as people parent, I'm going to read a highly relevant excerpt from Parenting from the Inside Out. And again, that's by Siegel and Hartzell. It's entitled Shopping for Shoes. As a parent, I discovered various leftover issues from my own childhood that were affecting my relationship with my children and robbing us of what could have been enjoyable experiences. Shopping for shoes was one of them. I found that I dreaded seeing their tennis shoes wearing out because it meant that I would have to take my two sons to the shoe store. They loved getting new shoes and initially looked forward to this excursion with excitement, as most children do. This had the possibility to be a delightful outing, since choosing new shoes is something children usually like to do, but it never turned out that way. My sons would choose the shoes they wanted, which I verbally encouraged them to do. Even though they were quite enthusiastic about their choice, I began to spoil the experience with my doubts about the color, the price, the size of the shoes, or whatever tangible aspect I could wrap my mind around. Their excitement about their choice began to fade, and an accommodating attitude of whatever you want, mom, is okay with me took place. I'd vacillate and reconsider the advantages of one pair of shoes over the other, and after a great deal of hassle, we'd leave the store with our purchases. We were all exhausted. The excitement of getting new shoes became buried in the unpleasant memories of the experience. I did not want to act the way I did, but repeated the experience many times, often apologizing to my children as we left the store. I always ended up in emotional conflict. Over shoes, I'd reprimand myself. How ridiculous. Why did I keep repeating a pattern that I clearly wanted to change? One day, after another disappointing shopping trip, my 6-year-old son, obviously feeling deflated, asked, "Did you like to get new shoes as a kid?" An overwhelming no flooded through my body as I remembered the frustration filled days of my own childhood shoe shopping outings. I was one of 9 children. With so many shoes to buy, my mother always went when there was a sale, preferably a big one, and the stores were crowded with shoppers and the prices were to her liking. I never went shopping alone with my mother, since there were always 3 or 4 of us who were in need of shoes at the same time. So at a crowded sale with mixed emotions, I'd seek my next pair of shoes. I knew that I was unlikely to get what I wanted. I was unlucky enough to have perfectly average sized foot or feet, for which the pickings were always very slim by sale time. My choices were minimal, and I usually fell in love with something new that was not on sale. This choice was sure to be nixed by my mother. Then there was my older sister, who had a very special narrow foot and was always allowed to purchase whatever she wanted because her size was seldom on sale anyway. I felt angry and neglected, but I was told to be grateful that I was easy to fit. By the time my mother had fitted all of us, she was extremely exhausted and very irritated. Her indecision about making choices, as well as her anxiety about spending money, became full blown, and I was worried about her behavior. I was lost in a sea of emotions and just wanted to go home and avoid the whole shopping scene. What could have been an adventure in choosing something of my very own was spoiled. This concludes the psychoeducation component of today's session. Now I'm going to move into the experiential portion where we will be exploring activities that you can utilize to help keep you grounded, engaged, and attuned to your children as you parent. For those who were not able to join us live, please go to attachniagara.com for the experiential activities and reflection exercises that we'll be doing in today's session. Thank you for watching.